Moses had grown up, he went out to see his people and saw their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinfolk. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he saw 2 Hebrews fighting. And he said to the one who was wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" The Hebrew answered, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh. He settled in the land of Midian and sat down by a well.
I brought my big jug of water so I don't get parched. So the title of today's sermon is Moses Smites the Egyptian. About a year or so ago, I took my family to Branson to see Moses at the Sight and Sound Theater. And, I've grown up watching the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and Brunner. That's the most popular Christian movie. The most popular Christian movie. And I would also invite you to turn in your pew Bibles to Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, or if you have an app on your phone, or if you brought your own, if you're fortunate enough to bring your own Bible, I invite you to turn to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 13. It's the Ten Commandments. I'll reference this along the way. So our scripture today uses the word kill or killing. Some Bible versions use smite, hence the word Moses smites the Egyptian. Some use the form strike. The Ten Commandments in Exodus 20 verse 13, it says, "Thou shalt not murder." And these are subtle differences. We're just talking verbs. But in the Hebrew, in the original Hebrew text, that word is spelled R-T-S-H, and I'm probably going to butcher it, ratsua. It's translated as kill or murder, and that same verb is used in Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15, and it's also used Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. I'm not trying to give a English lesson today or even a Hebrew lesson today, but it's a subtle difference, and it's written into our Bibles, and it's been written in for the past over 100 years. It doesn't matter really. I'm getting some feedback. It doesn't really matter the version. But it is written in there. These differences they're subtle, but they're powerful. There's several debates over these terms and the use of these terms. And the Oxford English Dictionary defines murder as the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought, often more explicitly willful murder. Unlawful means that capital punishment, war, abortion, self-defense, etc., that these are in most jurisdictions, that these are legally okay. The Oxford English Dictionary defines kill as the cause of death of a person, animal, or other living thing. So this Hebrew word, R-T-S-H, don't want to butcher it again, it's translated kill or murder. In the Exodus 20, verse 13, you'll notice there's a footnote and it refers you to the bottom of the page, and there it says, or kill. So there's this thread of change of our Bibles, and it is also reflected into mainstream Christianity through the Baptists and the evangelicals and Pentecostals, Catholics, so on. We have a brethren, I learned through a brethren belief class I took in April. We believe that all war is sin. So it's not too much of a stretch to say that we believe that all killing is sin. I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir on a lot of this. I feel like I'm bringing up the rear because I'm just learning this stuff. I'm in class through the Brethren Academy. Now I'm in college with WSU, as well as still taking classes with the Brethren Academy. So in the context of our modern society and the reason for this change, there's Christianity, modern Christianity, the mainstream Christianity wants to stand behind what we're doing. So it kind of ends up feeling like they're blessing the killings. On the way here this morning, and I can only preach from my wheelhouse, and I only bring this stuff up because I had these beliefs, and for my entire life, 30 or 40 years, and I was taught these things by my parents. I'm not a bassinet brethren, I get to hear that a lot. It's kind of interesting hearing people refer to themselves as bassinet brethren, but I'm not. That's not me. That's not me. And so you're all familiar with our peace stance. Majority of people in here are. You've grown up in this church. You've lived in this church. You've lived this peace. Peace Christianity. But it's new to me. A lot of Christianity is new to me. Even back to the Ten Commandments movie with Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston doesn't kill an Egyptian in the movie, if I remember right. He doesn't do the killing. So somebody else does the killing in the movie. So, in with this class and this paper that I was studying for the last 2 weeks, we were presented with these different Christian, non-Christian biblical writers, non-biblical writers. Some of these biblical writers were around the time of Jesus, Philo, Josephus. One of the stories that we even had to read, and we didn't find out till after we'd read and turned in our papers, that one of the versions we had to read was the Quran. The story of Moses is in the Quran, and it rewrites, which is a little sidebar. For it to be in the Quran is even more strange, because Islam is a nation of monotheistic, and they also don't believe that we sin, and so therefore we don't need to make an amends or seek forgiveness. So to have a story where somebody, and it writes in the story that Moses asks God for forgiveness, and he's forgiven by God, and he receives that forgiveness. It's written in the Quran that way. So why would, that was one of my questions. Why would the Quran pick up a Christian story some 600 years after Jesus, write it in, reword it? It's interesting. Back to the paper. Sorry for the sidebar. So in the Ten Commandments movie, Moses doesn't do the killing, and in some of these other non-biblical writers of the near Middle East at the time of the Bible, they even change Moses, as does our scripture. It's very subtle, but it does change what Moses does, and almost in an effort to downplay the killing. We have this. We are part of this American society that does the same thing. The death penalty is right. Somebody kills me, so I'm going to kill them back. So Roger, we're a New Testament church. Why all this Old Testament reference? Well, the only way to truly understand the New Testament is through the glasses, through the eyes, through the microscope of the Old Testament. So you can really understand who Jesus is by where he comes from. See, Moses was somebody who committed sin. In that movie, that play that I took my family to, I need a drink. Wow. There we go. In the movie, the play that I took my family to, and there's a scene where Moses is presented with the Ten Commandments, and it's a theatrical embellishment, but he talks about, well, God, how can anybody keep these, because I haven't been able to keep them. And so God goes on to tell him, well, this is, this law will be made perfect in my Son who is to come. It's not in the Bible. But it is a nice theatrical embellishment that definitely helps explain what Moses has done here. So we look to the New Testament because we're a New Testament church. So I would encourage you to turn to Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 and 22. And for those of you, that's towards the back of the book. That's okay. I'm not putting anybody down. It took me a long time to figure out where stuff was at in the Bible, too. Matthew 5, verse 21 and 22. And this isn't cherry picking. This is Jesus. This is in the red words, so it means something. Jesus writes all of this by saying, "You have heard that it was said of those of ancient times, you shall not murder." And remember, it's a footnote, so it means kill. "And whoever murders or kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you'll be liable to the council. And if you say fool, you'll be liable to the hell of fire." Again, this verbiage also means kill. Remember the footnote in the Old Testament. So contrary to our societal belief of justifiable homicide, all killing is sin. Jesus says so. Jesus says that even if you hate someone in your heart, you have committed sin in your heart. And we're told basically to love all people. Jesus also goes on to say, the two big condensing of Scripture down to love your neighbor as yourself, and love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. So I'm not just studying, I haven't just been studying to be a pastor since 2009. I can't preach on something unless it's all my messages are directed at me, or they come from my experience. And I've been bringing my entire belief system under the microscope of Jesus Christ since my conversion in 2006. I've been aligning my beliefs now since 2012, since you invited me into your church and my family. I've been bringing those beliefs under alignment of my church and my denomination. You so graciously welcomed me in and made me a beautiful part of your church family. I've wrestled with many of my own beliefs to get them in alignment. I've gotten rid of all my handguns, and I'm no longer concealed carry. I used to be an avid hunter, citing that it helps to control the population of animals and, keeps them from getting hit on the road. they still get hit on the road. They still get hit by cars. And all the while remembering what God said to Peter in Acts chapter 10, that go, Peter, kill and eat. As the big white cloth comes down and has animals of all kind, and Peter says, Lord, I've never ate of anything that's not kosher. And the Lord tells him to go and eat. Don't call anything unclean that I've made clean. Yeah, he's talking about Peter going and witnessing to Gentiles, yes. Cornelius, goodness gracious. Talking about Cornelius, but he is talking about eating. I'm wrestling with these portions of my life, and I don't know where I'm at. At times I don't know where I'm at with this. I'm being honest. I'm being transparent. In 2016, I had the honor of attending annual conference. There was a pre-conference ministers conference with John Deere as the keynote speaker. Some of you might remember me talking about John Deere. He's a former Jesuit priest who was kicked out of the order because of his work at 9/11. Being a on-site chaplain of 9/11, and then also going and protesting the killing of Muslims, and also protesting the war, because killing, as he writes in his book, all of his books, I've got 5 of them. I was given one of them at annual conference. John Deere writes in his books that these statements of nonviolent life, and he's kind of a new writer, so maybe you'll recognize the name Daniel Berrigan or the Berrigan brothers. I get a lot of heads nodding. Okay, the Berrigan brothers were his teacher. When he met the Berrigan brothers when he was in his late teens and early 20s, he was shaking and interviewing Daniel Berrigan, and Daniel Berrigan smoked a cigarette. That's the way Daniel Berrigan was up until he died at 95, and John Deere was a really good friend of his. So you see the influence. And all I'm trying to do is relate, the message as it was brought to me. So this book of the nonviolent life, as well as his other books on persistent peace, and John Deere is this really active, nonviolent person that advocates for it, and he has a felony. He spent years and years on probation or in prison for his active, nonviolent advocacy. Whether it's through his YouTube videos or through his books, there's this resonation of this statement of how we're to be nonviolent. And there's 3 points to it. He states that we're to practice nonviolence in 3 areas of life. 1, through meticulous internal personal dialogue. And as we're working on this on a daily basis, number 2, we are to practice meticulous interpersonal nonviolence with our children, our families, anyone we come in contact with. And while doing that, number 3, being active agents of nonviolent social justice in our communities as well as our country. Being nonviolent, even, and this is the one that also gets me too, being nonviolent to those who are violent to us. So when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm not to go cut them off. So I bring all this to you, church, because, where are you at with that? How's that going? Roger, he's probably had too much coffee. Yeah, I've had too much coffee. But, this isn't just a, feel good message and go on. Because I got to tell you, from a person who's never had nonviolent internal peace. I've spent 30-some years being 28, being a drug addict and an alcoholic, getting in fights and being violent and stealing and tearing stuff up and hurting myself, you know. So I haven't had a lot of people walk nonviolence out for me. You know, I come from a family, we do everything violently. We yell at each other. You know, we hold grudges about stuff that ain't even ours to hold grudges about. You know, we have formed these little committees of people, you know. So to have somebody walk that out for me, until I came here, that's never happened. You know, even through the sponsorship of AA and CA and NA and all the A's and all the anonymous stuff, you know, I stand up here because, you know, I can relate with Moses in this. I've never killed anybody. But, you know, what Jesus says about in your heart, man, I've hated a lot of people in my life. Me being the first one. You know, and I learned that because of who I was around and how my family operated in dysfunction. You know, I relate with Moses, you know, because he goes from being this violent person, and then he becomes this shepherd, and then he becomes this prophet, and then he becomes this leader. And I'm in here somewhere. You know, we see through the story of Moses, you know, from Exodus to Numbers, the retelling of it by Stephen in Acts before he's stoned, and then from Paul in his retelling of Moses. We see, you know, this move from violence to nonviolence. I can relate my story as I continue to move from violence to nonviolence. You know, this internal dialogue of nonviolence to myself has been very much a trial and error. It's been a learning curve. It's been hard. When you've done something, when you beat yourself for 30 years, it's hard to stop. It's such a habit. It's so ingrained in me. You know, but I've been learning. I've had to be very gentle with parts of myself because in dealing with those parts, I've been at war with those parts. You know, that's different for me. You know, that's not just beating the heck out of myself or beating the heck out of that part of me or being evil to the evil parts of me. That's different. It's different. It's important because if I'm going to be nonviolent in this world, I've got to be nonviolent to me, because what comes out of me is what goes into me. You know, if you consider yourself a Porsche or a Ferrari, Lamborghini, I'm a fat biker, so I consider myself a Harley, and my Harley's not going to go anywhere if I put dog turds in the gas tank. It's not. You know, I can't put junk in and expect it to run like a top machine. My life is exactly the same. I can't put junk in my head and expect to get good stuff out of it. It's been trial and error. I stand before you and I can tell you about my struggles because you've shown me the way of peace and the way of love. Since I walked through your doors, you've supported me, you've shown me, either through helping one another move. You know, when I first came and was introduced to this church is when we were moving Jenny. And whether, I want to say it was Phyllis with her walker. She had a box, and she was pushing stuff out. You know, no matter what it was, everybody was doing something. You know, so even to, you know, the hot topic of Love Feast. You know, Love Feast a while back was a no-no to even talk about it. Well, I'm an idiot. I'm going to talk about it. It's through the dissolving of it, of those troubles, those skirmishes around Love Feast, and dissolving them in a healthy way, in a healthy fashion. You taught me how to do that. You know, it's through going to leadership training in Great Bend that I learned how to do that in a healthy Christian way. My family doesn't want nothing to do with it, but that's neither here nor there. I know how to do it now. I've used a lot of that training in dealing with myself. You have shown me through your peace stance on war. You have shared with me your struggles, whether living out your peace stance in a time of Vietnam War and writing a paper on that, walking your whole family through that. That had to be so hard. But it was so important, doing what God had called you to do. Carolyn and Aaron, you guys recently went to the Poor People's Campaign. I saw the videos on the news, and there wasn't a lot of people there. So even doing your part in our community, it sometimes feels like you're standing alone. But you have shown me that that's where you stand. Aaron, you're always talking about helping the environment. And I'm not trying to pick you out, but I'm trying to praise you because, it's through all of you showing me and teaching me that I'm able to teach my children. I have the opportunity to break those cycles of violence in my family, and I just want to thank you for that. To be able to have the opportunity to be a junkie and a drug addict and stand up here and go to school and learn about God and how to preach and be an effective preacher, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to just give God what's left over. I want to give Him my best. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm still changing. You encourage me, and so I want to encourage you. Just as you have encouraged me, keep getting involved. Even if you're doing it alone, keep getting involved. Keep helping. Keep making a difference, because you are. You're making a difference. We may not change the entire world. Like Dr. King said in his message the night before he was killed, I may not make it to the promised land of internal, complete, all the time nonviolence, but my kids will. My kids can. I might, I can stand on the mountain and see the promised land. I don't know that I'll ever get there in my lifetime to be completely where I'm not beating myself up. I may be like David, and I might have too much blood on my hands, and I can't build that temple, but I can make the preparations for my kids. I can make those preparations for my kids. I can do it for somebody else because somebody else did it for me. Thank you. And remember, in my closing point, John Deere says to remember that we are to be mystics of non-violent love and peace instead of the bullies of a violent peace that we have been. May we take this message. Amen.
Thanks for watching this video from the First Church of the Brethren in Wichita, Kansas. If you'd like to watch another video, click the link on the right. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video. And we'd love to have you join us on Sundays at 9:30 for Sunday school and 10:45 for worship. Everyone is welcome and you're invited.